Have you heard about Porsche's new synthetic fuel?
Porsche is now officially producing carbon-neutral gasoline.
A carbon-neutral fuel.
You might have seen these headlines about Porsche saving petrol engines forever and bankrupting the EV industry with their so-called e-fuels. But is there any truth behind these obviously sensationalized headlines? Big disclaimer, I'm personally very biased towards e-fuel succeeding. Here's my Porsche, it's only a 987, but I hope to drive it for many more decades to come and prefer it to any soulless EV white good appliance. Okay, so what's the pitch? Well, Porsche is promising that you can have your cake and eat it too. E-fuel or synthetic fuel is chemically identical to petrol, so you can use it in whatever car you have right now and can be made using renewable energy, pulling carbon dioxide from the air and combining it with hydrogen from water. This creates methanol, which can be converted to petroleum, and theoretically the same amount of carbon dioxide coming out of your exhaust pipe over here is the same amount being pulled from the air during the manufacturing process. It is effectively carbon neutral. This sounds great, and on another positive note, while a lot of electric car enthusiasts would tell you at this point that converting renewables to e-fuels is pointless because it's inefficient. You lose about half the energy during the manufacturing process, and another 70% is lost converting the fuel in your tank into the movement in your wheels, and thus it's more efficient and just better to directly use the renewable energy straight into the battery of your car. But they are missing the point. A huge challenge with renewable energy is that it tends to not be produced at the location where it's going to be used. For example, Porsche's two locations for its e-fuel production facilities are rural Chile and rural Tasmania. So the question is, how do you get that electricity into your car? You can't transport it using overseas cables, and charging batteries the size of mountains and hauling them onto ships is a Herculean task that nobody can ever do. This is why converting renewable energy into a transportable medium like hydrogen or e-fuel is a very sound idea. However, this is where the dream of a future of lightweight Porsche flat six powered sports cars for everyone ends, and that's because there's simply not enough renewable energy on Earth to even begin replacing the amount of crude oil the world uses. Every single year, the world consumes 1.25 trillion gallons of oil, and by the end of the decade, Porsche will be able to produce about 0.22 billion gallons. This isn't even a drop in the bucket. It's completely and utterly inconsequential. John Cadogan, probably the most analytical car journalist that I know of, estimates that to merely capture enough carbon using the distilling method, for Australia alone, you would need a solar panel measuring 100 by 100 kilometers, which is an area greater than even Greater Sydney. Distilling isn't the most efficient method, admittedly, and it isn't what Porsche is doing, but it does demonstrate the severity of the scalability problem of extracting an element from the air that only makes up 0.04% of it. And now we have to ask the question, if this is all for the environment, why put so much effort into capturing carbon and combining it with hydrogen if we're just going to release the carbon back into the atmosphere all over again? Why can't we just use the hydrogen? Sure, hydrogen isn't as good of a fuel, it isn't compatible with my Porsche right here, and we'd have to use it as a gas, so it's the opposite of energy dense, but it does seem to be a much more sensible thing to do. So there's no future for e-fuels? Well, I would only say there's simply no future for carbon neutral e-fuels, and that's because there's a much easier way of producing e-fuels than hydrogen, which is the almost unlimited reserves of the methane hydrate that I talked about in my previous video that Japan is pinning its future on. In recent days, several Japanese shipping companies have already committed to using the methanol that can be produced from it to power their ships, and it will reduce pollution significantly and reduce CO2 by about 15% compared to heavy oil. And methanol is also one of the easiest ways to produce hydrogen and e-fuels, but you might notice that this isn't exactly green, and regrettably the only way to kind of spin it into thinking that it's a cleaner fuel is by using the fickle idea of carbon capture, which Mitsubishi has recently doubled down on, but none of this will scale nearly nearly enough before 2035, where traditional petrol and diesel-powered cars will be effectively banned by the EU and many other areas in the world. So this is my prediction. The future of cars will primarily be battery-powered. Yes, batteries are not green, nor is the power that charges them, and batteries will not become cheap anytime soon, but the momentum they have already is unstoppable, and them being expensive, well, I'm just afraid that poorer people will simply be priced out of car ownership, and seeing how few young people even today are interested in cars or even have a license, it's already happening. There will be a minority of cars in Japan that run on hydrogen and e-fuels, and heavy machinery like JCBs, buses, lorries will certainly use these fuels too. Ships will use the cheaper methanol, and for vehicles that really need energy density like planes, they will use e-fuels. So that's my prediction, but do let me know yours, and on that bombshell, thanks for listening.